We all know that OLEDs are fantastic for gaming in dark rooms. But what if I told you there's one that's better than other OLEDs to use in bright rooms? Hey, I'm Nicholas from Ratings.com. Today we're reviewing the ASUS ROG Strix OLED XG27AQDMG. It's a 27-inch gaming monitor with a 1440p resolution and 240Hz refresh rate. It uses a OLED panel and competes against similar monitors like the LG 27GS95QEB and the older ASUS PG27AQDM. On the surface, it has the same specs as those other monitors, but is there anything that stands out about it, and is it worth buying? First, let's take a peek at the design. You can tell it's a gaming monitor by looking at it, but it isn't too heavy on the gaming aesthetic either. There's some branding and RGB lighting on the back, and the panel itself is thin. It's well made without any obvious problems. Looking at the stand, it holds the screen well. There's even a slot to put your phone on top of the base. You can adjust it in a number of ways, and there's a cutout for basic cable management. While we're here, let's talk about what it offers in terms of inputs. It has a DisplayPort 1.4 input and 2 HDMI ports, which are limited to HDMI 2.0 bandwidth. There are also 2 USB-A ports to which you could connect your devices, but it doesn't have a USB-C port. One thing to know is that the inputs are set into the back of the monitor, and they can be hard to reach, especially if you have it on the stand. Okay, let's move on to the picture quality, starting with the SDR Brightness. This is where it really stands out versus other OLEDs, because it's very bright, so it fights glare well. It only gets this bright if you leave the uniform brightness setting off. But there's some changes in brightness across different content, which can be distracting if you're making windows smaller or bigger. If that bothers you, turning the uniform brightness setting on results in better consistency, but it also makes the screen dimmer. Even in HDR it gets bright, especially with small highlights. They pop against the rest of the image, which makes for a great HDR viewing experience. But it can't maintain this high brightness with large highlights. It's important to know that the uniform brightness setting isn't available in HDR. Instead, there's a brightness adjustable setting that's off by default. But you could turn it on and set the brightness setting to the max to make these small highlights get the brightest possible. Another thing to know about using it in a bright room is the screen coating it has. It's different from other monitors as it's the first 27-inch OLED with a glossy coating. This is different from the matte coating on other monitors because it results in a clearer image, but with a few trade-offs. It doesn't diffuse light the same way a matte screen does, so you'll see yourself staring into the screen while waiting for your game to load. But reflections aren't as direct as on a typical glossy screen either. It's still fine if you want to use it in a room with a few lights around, but not opposite a bright window. If you instead want to use it in a dark room, it performs really well there. Thanks to its OLED panel, it displays deep and inky blacks without any blooming around bright objects. Another advantage of this monitor when it comes to picture quality is that it displays a wide range of colors in HDR. It has good tone mapping with most colors, but it isn't perfect either. The HDR color volume is also great. It displays dark colors very well, but struggles with really bright colors. This performance is outstanding for a OLED, so it provides a realistic image, but it's behind QD OLEDs in terms of vivid colors. As for SDR, it does have a dedicated sRGB mode that has good accuracy before calibration. However, some colors are still oversaturated and the color temperature is on the warm side, giving it a slightly red tint. Even the Gamut doesn't follow the target well, as all scenes are too dark. This means you need to calibrate it for the best accuracy. Alright, before we move on to gaming, let's discuss a few more things regarding picture quality with a focus on productivity. First off, the text clarity is just okay, as it's worse than some other 27-inch 1440p monitors. This is because programs don't render text well with the monitor's RWBG subpixel layout. So if you use Windows ClearType, there's fringing around letters, and turning it off makes text harder to read. The monitor has a pixel edge setting that's supposed to reduce this fringing, but it actually makes the text clarity worse. Another advantage of this monitor is that it has wide viewing angles, so the image looks the same no matter where you view it from. This is useful if you need to show your screen to someone next to you, whether you're watching videos or gaming. One last thing to know if you want to use this monitor for productivity is the risk of burn-in. OLEDs are prone to this with constant exposure to the same static elements over time. This is mainly a problem if you have the same static elements on the screen all the time, like desktop icons, the taskbar, or even in-game elements. But as long as you change things like gaming a little, watching some videos, and doing a bit of work, you won't have too many problems. The monitor includes a few screen protection settings to reduce the risk of burn-in too. Features like pixel cleaning and screen move are meant to extend the life of the panel and minimize the chance of burn-in. Okay, time to move on to the gaming performance, which is where this monitor truly shines. You can reach the max 240Hz refresh rate with a DisplayPort connection. However, the refresh rate is limited over HDMI due to bandwidth limitations. Luckily though, it supports all common VRR formats over both connection types. Moving on to motion, fast-moving objects look incredibly sharp. Thanks to its OLED panel, it has a near instant response time at any refresh rate. It even has remarkable refresh rate compliance, meaning it makes full color transitions before the monitor draws the next frame. This is another factor that leads to the very crisp motion. The only blur you see, like at lower refresh rates, is caused by persistence. It does have a black frame insertion feature to reduce this persistence blur. While it's effective, it's pretty limited in how you could use it, and it also increases the input lag. It only works with fixed 120Hz signals, so you can't even use VRR at the same time. You can adjust the brightness with it on, but it only reaches a max of 131 nits, so it's still dim. Another downside is that it has noticeable VRR flicker with changing frame rates, which is typical of most OLEDs. You can see it mostly in dark scenes, but this is only an issue if the frame rate changes a lot, and not so much if your PC can maintain consistent frame rates. It does actually have a setting to reduce this VRR flicker called OLED anti-flicker. It works by setting a minimum refresh rate. For example, with it set to strong, the minimum refresh rate with a 240Hz signal is 200Hz. It does reduce the VRR flicker, but it doesn't remove it all, and the trade-off is that it introduces stutter instead. To round out your gaming experience, you need a monitor to have low input lag. Luckily, that's the case here because it has a low input lag with most refresh rates. It goes up with 60Hz signals, but it's still fine for gaming. I bet you're wondering if it works well with consoles. It doesn't have HDMI 2.1 bandwidth to take full advantage of both the PS5 or Xbox Series X or S, but you can still play games with a downscaled 4K signal at 60Hz or with 1440p up to 120Hz. It even supports VRR with both consoles, and there aren't any issues. Now that we know how it performs, this brings us to the main question. Does it stand out against the competition, and is it worth buying? There's a lot to like for most people, especially if you're looking for a 1440p 240Hz monitor for PC gaming. It offers both fantastic performance with its sharp motion and remarkable picture quality thanks to its deep blacks. The fact that it gets brighter than most other WOLEDs is a nice touch too, so it's something to consider if you want to use it in a bright room. Even the glossy coating is something to think about if you aren't a fan of the matte coating on other screens. It isn't a perfect monitor though. One of the bigger downsides is the lack of HDMI 2.1 bandwidth, which is pretty disappointing for a premium gaming monitor in 2024. Other similar monitors have the higher bandwidth to take full advantage of gaming consoles and HDMI 2.1 graphics cards like the LG 27GS95QEB. Although it doesn't get as bright as the ASUS, it still offers the same fantastic gaming performance, so it's a good alternative. If you're looking for the best 1440p gaming monitor and you don't mind spending more, there are a few higher end options you could get. The Dell Alienware AW2725DF is a fantastic gaming monitor that has a higher 360Hz refresh rate than the ASUS, so it's ideal even for competitive gamers. Another advantage is that the Dell has a QD OLED panel, so colors are more vivid. It's not better than the ASUS in every way because it doesn't get as bright, but it's still a clear upgrade overall. That's all for the ASUS ROG Strix OLED XG27AQDMG. If you want more details on the monitor, check out a written review. The link is in the description below. Until next time, I'm Nicholas from ratings.com, where we help you find the best product for your needs. Ciao.